Welcome to the Empire Builders Podcast, teaching business owners the not-so-secret techniques that took famous businesses from mom and pop to major brands. Stephen Semple is a marketing consultant, story collector, and storyteller. I'm Stephen's sidekick and business partner, Dave Young. Before we get into today's episode, a word from our sponsor, which is, well, it's us. But we're highlighting ads we've written and produced for our clients. So here's one of those.
I'm Sebastian Zupanek from Armadura Metal Roof, and our warranty lasts 50 years.
Hey there, Seabass. I'm Bill Crooked from Crooked Roofing.
Should have guessed.
Love that 50-year warranty thing. Sounds almost legit.
It is legit. All 50.
Right, sure. That's the beauty of prorating.
What are you getting at?
Prorating. All us roofers use it. See, every year the warranty gets a little worse, and by the last year, it's pretty much worthless.
We don't believe in prorating.
Don't get all weird on me now, Seabass.
Don't call me Seabass.
If you don't prorate your warranty, you could be stuck buying someone a new roof in 49 years.
And we would.
No, I mean, you'd have to pay for the whole thing.
That's right.
You're not following me.
I think I am.
Need a loophole. So you only pay 1/49th of a new roof.
But that would be crooked.
That's me, Bill Crooked. Pleased to meet you.
Get off my lawn.
Armadura.ca.
Stephen, when I saw the show notes for today, it's David and Goliath. We're not talking about me, are we? We're talking about the biblical David.
We're talking about the biblical David versus Goliath.
Because I was going to say, I haven't built any empires, dude. This is the one.
This is the one. And I want you to imagine this. After David defeats Goliath, he decides to go into management consulting and sets up David and Associates to advise small businesses on how to defeat the big competitor.
Yeah.
And so what advice would David give? That's what we're going to talk about today. So I just want you to think about this. David was the youngest of 8 kids. And his brothers went off to prepare for war, and he stayed at home to take care of the flock. And one day David was taking food to his brother, and he saw this huge man step onto the field who had this big thick helmet and massive armor and huge weapons. And that man was Goliath. And Goliath put down a challenge. He said, "Give me a man and let us fight each other."
Yeah.
And this kind of pissed David off. And so David told the king, "I'll fight him." And the king looked at scrawny little David, and at the end of the day, the king was like, "Well, what the heck? What have I got to lose?" Right? So David said, "Sure, go ahead and fight Goliath." Now, I want you to imagine at this point the recommendations that he got.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You need to train better with a sword, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lift heavy weights, get stronger. Wear a big, heavy armor.
Thicker armor. You need big armor.
And he's this little guy going, "I can't lift this shield. No matter how strong I get, I'm not going to be as strong as Goliath. I'm not going to wear this heavy armor." And think about it. This is not much different than what typical consultants will tell a business to do.
Oh, yeah.
Study your competitors, best practices, look around your industry, right? In other words, beat Goliath playing Goliath's game.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Here's what David knew. He'd never be as strong as Goliath no matter what he did. He'd never be as good as with a sword no matter what he did. And he couldn't lift the shield.
Yeah.
The armor was just restrictive. He was not going to win playing Goliath's game, fighting Goliath's fight.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to have to defeat Goliath fighting his way, using a sling.
Which is what he would use to protect the sheep.
Right. And he had been spending his whole life doing. So he goes down the river, picks 5 perfect stones, flings one, hits Goliath right in the head. Goliath falls to the ground. Walks over to Goliath, who's knocked unconscious by it, pulls out Goliath's sword, hacks off Goliath's head. Done. Victory is mine. Right?
Yeah.
So naturally, he becomes very famous, and all sorts of people want him to sort of, "Hey, I want you to help me defeat Goliath." And that led to David and Associates being the #1 consulting firm of the Red Sea at the time.
Okay, yeah.
So that's basically our story. But I got thinking about this from the standpoint of what lessons would David teach entrepreneurs?
Okay.
And I think that's what this whole podcast is about, is you can't defeat Goliath playing Goliath's game.
Right.
Going around and looking at best practices in your industry and looking at your industry and saying, "I'm going to do what they're doing," is like saying to David, "Get better at a sword."
Mm-hmm. One of the mistakes people listening to this podcast, I hope they don't make, but one that they're at risk of making is to look at these businesses that we're profiling as they exist in the after state, right? They're already an empire. And don't lose sight of the fact that what we're focusing on is what did they do different to become an empire? Who was their Goliath? And did they use a sling or did they play the game of their competitors? And most of them, man, they wrote their own story. They did not play the game of their giant.
Well, and in the show notes, we're going to have a great example. And this is a video that was done by one of our business partners, Mick Torbay, where he's telling a story of a client of his who's in the hardware store industry. And they have a small hardware store in a small town in Northern Ontario, Canada. Well, it's not a small town, decent sized town, because one day Lowe's comes to town. So Lowe's being the big giant, Lowe's being the Goliath. And what the client initially wanted to do is, Lowe's is coming to town, Lowe's got cheap price, we got to fight them on price. It's like, no, that's Lowe's game. You have to play a different game. And Mick walks through the recommendations he made to this client, and it worked. Lowe's came into town and these guys continued to grow.
Yeah.
So, the lesson here is find your sling, find your stone.
Stay tuned. We're going to wrap up this story and tell you how to apply this lesson to your business right after this.
How's business?
Yeah, good.
Why isn't it great?
We were growing 20-30% every year for 5 years. Then we went flat in the last 3. Growth used to be easy. Now, nothing we do seems to have the same effect anymore. If you're not growing, you're dying, and I can't stand to think we've hit the top and are coming back down.
So you build a hell of a castle and you're worried. Maybe it's time to build an empire.
Huh?
What you got here won't get you to where you want to go. You need a fresh perspective. There's these guys that are looking for business owners just like you. Smart, customer-focused, but with flat sales.
What do they do?
Build empires, but they don't work with just anyone. You have to be customer-focused.
So what exactly do they do?
Well, some say they're marketers, but I call them crusaders. Check out their website at empirebuilderprogram.com. Like what you see, set up a meeting.
Crusaders, empires, castles. I think someone's been getting so old they're medieval.
empirebuilderprogram.com. Check it out before you become a dinosaur.
You mean dragon?
No, I mean dinosaur. They were good too, for a while. Sure you want to be just good? empirebuilderprogram.com.
Let's pick up our story where we left off, and trust me, you haven't missed a thing.
So, the lesson here is find your sling, find your stone, find the thing that you are really strong at and use that as your weapon against Goliath. Don't fight Goliath's game.
No, I think that's great advice. And also, if David's smart, and I think David was pretty smart, right? He knew not to fight Goliath playing Goliath's game. There are some people that would go into this management consulting business and go, you know what? I used a sling to beat Goliath, so I'm now the sling expert, right? Everybody needs a sling. We got to find perfect rocks, and everybody needs a sling because that's how you kill Goliath. And that's not the lesson either.
That's a great point, because part of the reason why this worked for David is David used a sling. And David was familiar with a sling. And this is a great point, because this, again, would be where traditional consultants would go. The way to always do this is use a sling. And that's not necessarily the answer either. And this is part of the reason why, when people hire us to do this for them, one of the reasons why we insist they take a full day out of their day, they travel away from their business and come and see us, because you really need to create this different environment. And the reason why it takes a day is it takes us time to really get to know them, find their sling, find their stone, get them in a different environment so that they're thinking about things differently, to really figure out what is that bold idea that can be turned into the Goliath killer, the empire builder.
Exactly. And that there's no one best weapon. There's no one best strategy. It's finding the right strategy for the right business to address the fight with the right competitor.
Right.
Those pieces, it's not one size fits all by any stretch.
Yeah, that's a great observation.
It makes me think of, and I'll pick on the dental industry for no reason other than this is what springs to mind. Is there's so many dentists that managed to stumble onto a good marketing concept and then create a marketing company for other dentists that cookie cuts the whole strategy. And it probably works better than no marketing plan, but you end up looking like all your competitors when you follow that path.
Yeah, it's great for the first 5 guys who do it.
Yeah.
Because it's a new idea, but then eventually it becomes the way the industry is. And as you said, it's very cookie cutter. And it also works when somebody has nothing. It's a little bit like that joke of outrunning the bear. 2 guys are going through the woods and a bear comes along and one of them's, putting on his shoes. And the other guy goes, well, those running shoes aren't going to help you outrun the bear. And he's like, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. Yeah. So when you got nothing and this cookie cutter strategy comes along, yes, you will have some result from it because it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And look, it'll make you money and it'll grow your business and you'll be a solid number 3 in your industry. But what you are not going to be is the empire.
Yeah.
So the question is, am I okay being a solid number 3 in my industry, or do I want to change the world?
Yeah.
If you want to change the world, that's a different approach.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share us, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and leave us a big, fat, juicy 5-star rating and review at Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to schedule your own 90-minute empire building session, you can do it at empirebuildingprogram.com.